We shall continue with our conversation on separation of powers in a democracy, the importance of separation of powers in a democracy. Before we went to our break, we're looking at the implications, basically, of having the same person forming part of the executive and legislative branches, and the implications of that, the negative, and is there a positive to this? Is there, because we don't want to just criticize, I get. Is there a positive to having a minister, being in the executive and also being in the legislative branch?
Peish, that's a difficult question. I think, if there would be a positive to it, we have a system where it allows for clear checks and balances to happen. Because, like I said, it's not like every country in the world has a system where everything is separate. But I think it's then looking at our particular, system, Botswana, that overlap between executive and legislature. Are there systems and procedures in place to allow that? There's a system that allows for transparency, that allows for checks and balances to happen, where the legislature actually is still able to do its job. That overlap of personnel. And I think we are finding that there isn't a very clear or robust system of checks and balances, which then means that we don't really see the advantages of that in as much as we could if there were clearer, procedures that allow for those checks and balances to happen. So, the system can be procedures, the executive can be held to account by the legislature as it's supposed to be, then we would say, yeah, but because that isn't there, then
all right, Retsamologo, do you want to add to that?
Ready, police.
Okay. Ready, police. Sorry about that.
Yes. I think the answer to that question would be about the issue ya gore tota sente puso ba batho ka batho strength sa yone se ha goeng se mo goeng a democracy, and I would assume the position of minimalists in this regard, because bona ba dumela gore democracy mosola yo no motona ke gore o facilitate stability mo lehatsheng, ke gore di manano a puso a tsamaye sentle, o ska gana le kubetsano, go nne le thokgamo, go nne le kagiso tota sente that's the only positive thing about the system ya rona mo Botswana, gore it creates stability and enables government to proceed with its policies, programs, etc. Whether that is the aspiration of the people themselves or not is another question that can be addressed, by karabo tse dingwe tse di leng teng. Me I like na se ke se lemogang ke gore yone system ya gore batho bao ba gore ke issue gore ha o le wa go pata o sena gore gonna smooth here. How they chaos, how the problems. So I think the answer is only arapo intilo government, snana rapo in the government, more well bone, hona that participatory, robust participatory approaches to our democracy.
But okay, so that is one great advantage, stability. We all want stability, we all want security. And if you talk to some people who have been to Libya, they would say what is happening now, the instability there, they would rather, go pre-democratic days where there was stability. Now the question is, because we do not have the history that Libya has, for example, in other countries, can we still say we can trade off participation through representation, members of parliament? Can we sell our interests as individuals through our MPs for the kind of stability that we have now? And this is why I ask this question, because when we have interests that are not met over a long period of time, they can actually cause conflict in the long run. So the peace and the stability that we are trying to protect in the short term can actually now in the long term be what is unstable and what is insecure and what brings conflict. Can we continue the way we are for another, say, 20, 30 years? Or something must change? Simolo.
I think that's a very loaded question, but I think it's a question it's really important for us to be thinking about as Botswana, because we can think about it okay, democracy, one of the pillars of a democratic government, you would say something like efficiency. So yes, having the stability allows for efficiency to be able to happen. But on the other hand, part of democracy is also things like accountability, representation, equality, etc. All of those other things are part and parcel of democracy. And I think your democracy or your system is not evolving actually. Okay, post-independence, where our country was in a clock that stability in order to bring about so things like to make decisions that would actually advance us economically, advance our political system, all of those different things. But I think democracy is not a static thing. I don't know how to say that in Setswana. Democracy should not be static. Democracy, I think, should be evolving. It should ever be evolving. Because if we're saying that people are at the center of democracy, then it means that as society also changes, then we need to be ensuring that our government actually is also reflecting what is happening or the interests of people. And so is that I think stability has been really useful for us over, let's say, the first 40 years of our democracy. But I think now you are finding that people want, or people are demanding to see the accountability in democracy. Their interests to be represented. People want to see a government that's ruling fairly. People want to see equality. And so people are getting agitated. I think we've seen it over the last, even I would say over the last year, the last 2 years, even over the last couple of months, the frustrations beginning to come up. I think even, the calls before when people were saying, let's see parliament, I think those are all indications where people want to actually have a transparent government. They don't want these decisions that are just taken. It's our the 1, 2, 3. Implement. So I think democracy really has to be evolving, and we have to really recognize we can't just say stability and efficiency, that's all we need, because that means we're actually discounting the other important aspects of democracy. And sooner or later, people will start to demand for those things as well. Because every 5 years, I'm going to the polling station, I'm putting my vote down. My interests are not being represented. Our interests as labor are not being represented. And those things then create frustrations, which, as you say, then can create also the conflict within the country. So the stability then, okay, stability, because now people are saying, we want our interests actually served. So I think there's a place and a time for everything, and I think that government needs to also be responsive to what is happening, because democracy is not static, but rather it can be, it's an evolving thing, because democracy at the heart of it, yeah, but.
I would like to connect what you just said about, you know, accountability and interests and stability to the judicial branch, and how the principle of collective responsibility as enshrined in 51, I believe, of the Constitution, where cabinet ministers are jointly accountable to the assembly and the public for government policies and decisions. How is that collective responsibility in this day and age in Botswana, how is it working to help, say, the judiciary or just the lawmaking process? I'm asking this, and I'm actually asking it, I'm thinking about this question as I ask it, because I'm just thinking, if the executive has their dominance over the legislature, and they present bills or laws that would only probably take into consideration the interests of the executive and not necessarily the members of parliament as representatives of constituencies. What can we then say about our lawmaking process and the different laws and policies that we have in our country? And linking that to how important the separation of powers is when it comes to lawmaking.
Okay. Ke rata ke boela gape issue ya democratic minimalism, gore go re puso ya batho ka batho ka ha ntseng ka teng hela sente a re ka e seka sentle. Matshwenyego a yone thata ke gore go ska ga nna dikgogakgogano mo lehatsheng, go nne le kagiso, go ska ebile kagiso ya teng e ska nna e motho a e pateletswang e leng gore e voluntary. Ga re hetola puso go ska ga nna le makwere, go ska ga loa, go ska ga tweng. Le ha go diriwa yone melao yone, there is a clear process of participation e mongwe le mongwe a itseng, le ha ena le limitation tsa yone, gore ko bohelelong ma parliament ke ona re representang ko parlamenteng. And I take you also from what Matlaga said earlier, that puso ya batho ka batho ke ngwao, is a culture. It's not static, ya change. Maybe it's ke nkare some rules tse leng gore ga re setse re bua ka advancement ya di interests tsa batho in the policy making process. Re iphitlhela re palelwa ke go tlhalosa sente gore democracy mosola yone ke eng, kana what role does it play, because o taitela ele gore re na le 50 years re ntse re ipusa mo Botswana. Re lekile nte go thabolla particularly what they call macroeconomic aspect of the economy, but re santse re na le mathata a gore re na le di problem hela tse di tseneletseng tsa inequality mo lehatsheng la rona, tsa poverty, tsa eng. But then e re tisa gone ko seemong sa go ipotsa gore ra re nyaanong ka puso ya batho ka batho, what has it delivered, particularly to issue the interest in parliament. And parliament, has it managed to moderate the interest tse di leng teng mo lehatsheng la rona, kana re bona advancement ya the interest of a certain elite as opposed to inclusivity and other issues tse leng gore ra di sologela mo government. The answer doesn't lie in democracy, as when Mamrapid earlier said, gore batho bangwe ba hella ba misa puso ya ga Re Gaddafi. I don't want to go much into detail about that because Karabo lies in the issue ya developmental process. Or how, to what extent are these developmental processes inclusive? Harira melao mo parlamenteng. A re lebelela gore melao ye nya gora gore ya hitisiwa. Re swantse re lebelle gore ha isna na hitisiwa. How does the laws, the policies impact on the livelihoods of the people themselves? And that democracy doesn't really address.